A public utility that many of us take for granted is drinking fountains. Since the mid-19th century, thousands of public drinking fountains have been installed and maintained across Melbourne and Victoria. But not all cities are as lucky as us. Even though places for people to get drinking water have existed for thousands of years, they are notably absent in many other cities and countries. So how come Australia, and especially Melbourne, has so many? To find out why, we need to go all the way back to the 1850s. As Melbourne grew rapidly after its establishment in 1835, there was increasing public demand for the installation of drinking fountains. These had begun to be installed in Britain and were very successful. There were two main motivators at the time for installing them, and the first was concern around public health. Providing clean drinking water to the masses was seen as a way to improve general health and well-being by many wealthy citizens and philanthropists. The other main motivation was the temperance movement. This was a very influential social idea born out of concern for the impacts of alcohol consumption, especially among men. Providing free public drinking water was seen as a way to encourage people to forego pubs and drink water instead if they were thirsty. Both of these reasons had a lot of weight behind them, but despite many requests and demands, none were being built at the time in Melbourne by the City Council. As news of the success of drinking fountains in Britain spread throughout the Empire and to Australia, many outraged citizens of Melbourne wrote letters to newspapers complaining of their absence. Many speculated that the reason why the City of Melbourne was dragging its feet was because many of the councillors owned pubs and hotels. Drinking fountains would reduce their income, as at least some of their customers would turn to free public water instead of visiting their businesses. By 1859, pressure was steadily mounting on the council to act. The Argus and several other prominent newspapers started an editorial campaign in favour of public drinking fountains. And Mr. Richards even offered to build some himself, provided that he would be allowed to display ads, but this proposal was rejected. But there was some hope when in March 1859, the Age newspaper reported that the council was finally developing designs for public drinking fountains. The news was warmly welcomed, and Melbourne's first government public drinking fountain was officially opened on the 9th of August 1859. It was called the Victoria Fountain and was built in the centre of the intersection of Collins Street and Swanston Street. Almost immediately, though, it began to run into problems. It was built in the same year as the opening of Melbourne's first water supply via the Yan Yean pipeline. If you're interested in learning more about this, check out my other video here in the top right-hand corner. The effect of the fountain opening at the same time was that the water pressure was too high. The Yan Yean pipe was a gravity-fed water supply, and there was no consideration in the original design that the pressure would be so great by the time it reached the centre of Melbourne. Upset citizens wrote angry letters of complaint to the council and newspapers that they were regularly subjected to sprays of water from the fountain when trying to walk past. Many people also disliked its design, which spawned many more mocking letters and newspaper columns. Due to this and rapidly increasing road traffic, the fountain was moved to Carlton Gardens in 1864, safely out of the way. But it still attracted criticism as being an unsightly feature, and so it was demolished in 1879. In the meantime, something else interesting was happening. Some local businesses began building and funding their own drinking fountains rather than waiting for the government to act. These were free and open for anyone to use, but with inscriptions with messages advertising their business. This started to set a precedent for privately funded but publicly accessible drinking fountains. This eventually became fashionable among the philanthropic upper middle class and wealthy citizens. Through either direct funding or charitable organisations, they would pay for many of these facilities to be built throughout the city. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, most of these were done by organisations affiliated with the temperance movement. This was the time when they were at their height of influence and public image, and some of these survive around Melbourne today. Chances are, if you find a drinking fountain that looks something like this, it will have some kind of inscription on it associating it with a temperance society. One example of these was constructed in the middle of the intersection of Russell Street and Burke Street by the Melbourne Temperance Society in 1911 to commemorate their former secretary, Thomas Ferguson. It was originally a 6-metre high stone column supported by a granite base, but this was destroyed after being hit by a truck in 1947. Fortunately, the granite base still survives and has been re-erected in University Square in Carlton, which you can visit today. By 1900, these also began to become more than just a place to get free water. Non-profit organisations and governments began using them as a way to commemorate events or people. This one on Bridge Road outside the Richmond Town Hall is one example. It's designed as a memorial to George Henry Bennett, a councillor and mayor at the City of Richmond and member of the Parliament of Victoria. After the Second World War, it seems that drinking fountains continued to be built and maintained by councils across Melbourne and Victoria. By now they were considered less of an art piece and more of a public utility. Many of the large post-war construction projects incorporated drinking fountains into their design, such as the Dandenong Market Roundabout and a memorial to Matthew Flinders in Mornington. Historically, poor quality of tap water in many countries from public water supplies meant that this same period was not generally marked with a similar construction boom of drinking fountains. To this day, in many places around the world, bottled water is most commonly drunk, even to the point where you can't even get tap water in restaurants or cafes. Fast forward to the early 2000s, and drinking fountains once again became common items in the news. Campaigns to reduce dependence on single-use plastic bottles were in full swing, and public sources of water were seen as an important facility to address this. Today, this is still a common way to promote drinking fountains. Together with climate change and increasing heat in Melbourne, public drinking fountains seem more popular than ever. If you put all of this history and context together, we can begin to see how Melbourne bucked the trend and thankfully still has thousands of these public facilities right across the city. A combination of our high quality of tap water, anti-alcohol campaigns, public memorials, and jealousy of the UK has resulted in a fantastic legacy that continues to this day. Thanks for watching this video on Melbourne's drink taps. If you're interested in learning more about the temperance movement and the significant impact that it had on Melbourne, I would highly recommend Dr. Elizabeth Taylor's book on the topic called Dry Zones: Planning and the Hangovers of Liquor Licensing History, which I've linked to in the description. Thanks again, and see you next time.